Welcome back to the seventh grade mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about false gods. People worship things that are outside themselves, material things. They get caught up in the appearance and the intrigue of celebrity, and it leads them into these false ideas of who they are, false representations of reality. So many of these people are also bullshit artists. And idolatry goes all the way back to the days of the Bible because they created these fake idols to worship in place of the true God. The most popular idol that comes to mind or that is in the historical lexicon is the golden calf or the bull with the gold circle above its horns. There's another place you see this is on Wall Street. Outside Wall Street is a huge bull, but all this is built into symbolism. And there are many people that don't see the correlation between symbolism, idolatry, and the dark arts. But we'll get into that shortly regarding the dark arts. See, much of this stems from the developmental years of a person's life. A child, if they do not get the correct type of nourishment from their parents, it will warp their development. A child needs to be given a constant diet of things that will develop them. For example, if they're mistreated by their parents or they're rejected by their parents, that can turn into a view of themselves that's lowly and despicable. And so they then create a idealized version of their self, and it starts to fork and veer away from their true selves. And the way you cultivate a true self or the true image of a person is when that child is fed on a diet of love, physical connection, hugs. Hugs are important, and also through social interaction. But when you don't feed a child this, that's when things start to develop in these deviant directions that become these psychoses that can warp and turn into like really big problems.
Look, it's always really important for the child to look up to the parents. Now, I realize that parents ain't perfect, and this is probably the first relationship of idolatry there is. But it's important because in the development of the child, if they can't believe in their parents, they can't believe in nothing else. When we grew up, you never violated that relationship. Like, every house on our block, the parents were different, but whatever that parent said to that kid, it was law for all the other parents. But nowadays, you got people like messing that relationship up, and people think that, okay, I'm saving this kid from abuse. Look, I think it's the 14th Amendment, but it gives you the right to raise your kids the way you want to. And I think that a lot of people, right now, they're raising their children by committee, by the shit they see on TV, by these different messages. And now, all of a sudden, the kid does not properly look up to the parents. In fact, the kid and the parents are on the same level. Then, next thing you know, this kid is having a kid too early, or this kid is running away, or this kid's doing it. And so, like I said, we do understand that idolatry is wrong, but in some places it's designed a certain way for you to reach the next level. Like, okay, my parents know what they're talking about. They might not know everything, but they know what they're talking about. Listen to your mom and dad. Or if you're blessed with a mom, listen to your mom. If you're blessed with a dad, listen to your dad. Hopefully an uncle or somebody stepped in and took care of you. Many of us are even raised by our siblings. But there's somebody there that is showing you love with nothing else in return, and that's that first God relationship. But also earlier, something else that you said, Deep, that we kind of didn't address. You said that you got the bullshit artists, but there's like two or three.
Well, hold on a second, but hold on, park that for a second, because I want to remain on the children for a second, because this can't be overstated. Because when you love a child unconditionally for themselves, and you don't create a false image for that child. So before the child even creates a false image, there are parents that will put these huge expectations on a child without even quietly examining that child's behavior or that child's psyche. And so you have to really love that child unconditionally for themselves, who they are, because that leads to their biological, emotional, and social needs being satisfied. And they then remain connected to their true selves. Go ahead.
Okay, you said you dropped this shit that you don't want us to talk about that. Look, the reason it's deep is because so much of yourself, you're also discovering who you are. Sometimes your parents know who you are before you do, whether that's sexual. So many parents are like, oh, I knew my kid was probably gay, or I knew my kid would be a good athlete, or or even the kids, the siblings amongst each other. Why were you harder on him than me, or why were you easier? Like, look, I was trying to motivate that one. I knew that you would do this, and sometimes that could be a mistake. Sometimes you may make the wrong call, but that relationship of like, okay, I'm providing something for my kids later on. I'm building a business. Hopefully, they'll take over it, or I'm giving them the skills they need. That's if a parent does that, then a lot of stuff starts out much better, much earlier than waiting until somebody becomes 17, 18, 19 to discover themselves and try to figure stuff out. Now, also finding out who you are is a big part of this, but the whole idolatry thing, you said there's like some shysters out there. There's some people who are fully aware of what they're doing is bullshit. There's other people who aren't aware of what they're doing is bullshit. And there's some people that just get swept up in the whole love thing. They love something so much that they try to elevate it. I think those are the three types that just come to mind. Somebody could love their car, they elevate it, and my car is everything to me, and that kind of thing. There are some people who are fully aware that what I'm doing is bullshit, but it'll give me the adulation I want from other people. There's a lot of athletes out there that, I do this for money, and this is just the way I make my money. But then there's other people who start worshiping the adulation, and the best example I got is like a professor when you're in college. Some of your professors, they start talking and they just like what the fuck they saying. They don't go like, shoot.
I sound great.
I have the guy's Tyson. Yes, I have a deep voice. So whatever I say is inside that black hole is amazing. How the fuck do you know? But the thing is, I had a professor that said, if you don't laugh at least 3 of my jokes this year, I will fail you. And this is true.
Oh, he's got all types of issues.
Yeah, he was like, hey, Ren, I'm like, your jokes ain't funny. He's like, okay, well, shit, your grade is. I'm like, okay. And I'm joking. Then I realized the motherfucker gave me a C. And I'm like, no, nigga, you bullshit. So I started like, but that's bullshit. That is a relationship that's an idolatrous relationship. That's bullshit. Now, true enough, I'll say it was necessary to get that grade, but nowhere when that class was over did I ever think that motherfucker had much else to offer me other than what was inside that realm. But the whole God worship, the elevation of things that shouldn't be elevated, there's all kinds of stories that warn us about this stuff. Everything from the devil itself, his self or herself, whatever you want to call her, going down to making Faustian deals, G versus E. You're making a deal for your soul. And I think that's what people don't understand, that the soul is a real commodity. And sometimes we wager our soul against the future, our own ability, and we mess around and we attach it to things it shouldn't be attached to, whether that's an unhealthy relationship, sexual or otherwise. Whether that's a material thing, like an idol, like a gold chain. When people are killing each other over these gold chains by Jesus' peace, that's idolatry. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes the guy's going to steal that chain to sell it, but a lot of those guys steal those chains and wear them because they know they can't afford them. But all of a sudden, it's like they're taking the other person's success and they're displaying it. Like, now I'm just as successful as them. I even told you about, I had a homeboy that used to mess with a chick that I mess with. So now, mind you, this nigga never graduated high school, but all of a sudden, because he fucked 1 or 2 chicks that I fucked, he thinks he's on my level. Those are the relationships we're talking about. Like, this idolatry thing just ain't physical. This ain't just back in the day when people molded little gold calves or little men and women and said, hey, this is such and such. So a lot of that stuff is mental, and iconology. Our brains are designed to attach certain things and ideals to things, and not idolatry, but iconology is also the same thing. That's why it's so hard to break that whole white Jesus thing for black folks.
Okay, so let's go back in time. Let's go back in time to the land of the Canaanites. The Canaanites worship Baal or Baal. And this term Baal worship has come to the fore when you start to dig into and examine the belief system of very, very wealthy people that are in power, that are controlling the events that we're seeing today now. And it's because things in human life are cyclical. They move in cycles. They come out of fashion, they go back into fashion over and over and over again over the eons. But Canaan, in the land of Canaan, the worship of Baal was prevalent. But this is a time where base sex worship, religious prostitution, human sacrifice, these were all common things. So these were dark times in humanity where people would offer flowers and fruit and animals and their firstborn and all types of strange things in sacrifice to this deity. So the problem is that when you look in the Torah, you look in the Christian Bible, and you read about the Canaanites, you see that they were punished for idolatry because they turned away from God, the true God, and worship Baal. And this Baal worship is what led to their downfall. And in history, when you really examine it, it really became a problem when King Ahab married Jezebel. Jezebel was a Phoenician. She had a temple built for Baal because her husband thought it was okay. But let's discuss who Baal was. Baal was the lord of fertility and life. And so these Canaanites believed that if you please Baal, you would have 7 years of fruitful harvests and children being born. But if Baal lost to Mot, M-O-T, who was his adversary, who was the Lord of Death, then you would have 7 years of famine and poor harvest and family members and children dying. So if these things started happening, then you didn't please Baal and Mot won out. So you had this yin yang scenario that was going on. And you have to understand that these people who worship these deities, they always put a veneer on the outside of it that is beneficial. But when you look at the true practice of it, or what the cost of this devotion is, it is evil. It's prime evil, because you're dealing in blood sacrifices. You're dealing in dark magic,
consuming of blood and stuff like that. What my brother's telling you is that some people to this day are practicing this. And what happened, here's the issue that nobody wants to address when it comes to this whole success thing. A lot of people start to acquire a little bit of knowledge once they start to acquire success. And this was something that I've always said on all past shows you've ever listened. Stop looking for knowledge, and your quest should be for truth. But what happens when you start to getting on that quest for knowledge, you get a little bit of success and you get a little bit more knowledge, and you think that you're as smart as you think you are. And so what happens is people find out about these different practices, and they find out that there's other successful people doing this. So they're attributing their success to this thing that has always been condemned and has done a lot of bad things in our society. So, so you hear us talk about the music industry, you hear us talk about celebrity, you hear us talk about athletes, and there's all kinds of sacrifices being done behind the scenes that we don't realize. So when these people get indoctrinated or get sucked into this successful cabal, if you will, there are practices that they didn't know. Like, yeah, bro, if you want to hang with us, you got to do this. Peer pressure's a motherfucker. It sounds corny, but this is some like high level peer pressure, and these motherfuckers get sucked in, and so like I said, this idolatry, that's an old ass word, but that shit is still going on today. This wrong God worship, is real, and so we're just trying to warn people, like, hey, don't dismiss every fucking thing you see. And the symbolism, like, just because you don't worship something does not mean that symbolism ain't there in plain sight. And my brother just told you got Wall Street with a huge ass bronze bull sitting right there. Yeah, I get it. It's a stock market, bull and bear market. I understand what they tell you, but what does it mean to that other motherfucker that's walking up there and that owns the building and owns the 3 or 4 other buildings around it? What does it mean for his clique of 6 rich motherfuckers?
Okay,
that's what you gotta understand.
The Canaanites believed that the only God that was superior to Baal was his father, El, and that was the true God. But again, they would cloak this dark blood sacrifice, this spirit cooking, in the benefits of the land and the benefits of the harvest and all this nonsense. It's always covered with a facade. But Again, like they would do things like kill young children and bury them in the foundations of a house or a public building as it was being built. And you hear about this when they did the archaeological dig on the home that belonged to Benjamin Franklin. And they found the skeletons of small children with holes carved in their skulls. Now, Benjamin Franklin was part of the Hellfire Club. And the Hellfire Club was a group of people who practiced dark magic and engaged in ritual sacrifice and all types of strange, base, orgiastic practices. Mm-hmm. Right. So, again, like, you have to understand what you're really dealing with, because when people, they want to talk about how, the founding fathers, or they were, this and that, and they were the light of the world, and they were great. And I'm like, you don't understand the true story about these people and like what they really were, because this is really a lot of fucking darkness.
You understand? No, I was gonna say they didn't know they were making this great country. Like everybody's like, America's great. Like, look, they're only, when they tell this story, they're telling you like 6% or 5% of what really went down. And we're adults now. We know. Look, America done did some fucked up shit, and it's still doing fucked up shit. So you know what an image is about. These motherfuckers was about image. So even if they didn't know what they were doing was image, but the people who plucked the little nuggets from here and there. Look, when you watch the History Channel, you hear about the Hellfire Club. You hear about these secret cabals and these different organizations. They're always finding these old houses with shit in the basement. So when you hear that shit, you're like, oh my God, secret societies is cute. But then they don't tell you about the babies who are buried in the basement. They don't tell you about the bones. And see, that's what makes that whole slavery thing so convenient. Whenever this must have been a dead, buried slave. Yeah, right, motherfucker. like slavery makes everything convenient. Like it's an all-encompassing thing that they can use for anything. This must have been a dead slave, or this baby died during childbirth. A lot of them motherfuckers had them babies for a sacrifice. That's what makes this shit disgusting. That's what makes this shit disgusting. But nobody wants. The reason. Okay, let me explain this to you. It takes two people to lie, not just the one to say it, but it takes one to believe it. So sometimes your discernment doesn't kick in because you've been indoctrinated already into this America thing, and they already got you. They worked on you since you were 5 years old and tell you certain shit. That's why it's so hard to black folks to understand this slavery thing. It is a bad thing, but it wasn't the whole country. You have black folks already here working and owning land. So whenever you try to like, hey man, your family was probably already. No, we came over on slave ships. Like, hold it. I didn't say that some of your relatives didn't come over on slave ships. I'm trying to sit here and say that, you probably have some entitlement shit already here. Well, that's how this shit, that story of slavery makes everything okay. Because even white folks use it, my parents were part of the Underground Railroad. How do you know they wasn't smuggling motherfuckers for sex? These motherfuckers was nasty, doing disgusting ass shit.
Wow. Hold on, stop.
Up.
Whoa. Slow it. Okay. No. We're not just going to gloss over that part right there. Okay. Dude, that adds a whole new element to the situation.
Doesn't it?
Because it's always touted as this pious, most noble act that people could engage in, rescuing enslaved Africans from enslavement and plantations. But some of these people that were engaged in that, they was into some strange. They had no because listen. They freed them and like, J-Bo, how about you come and live not on my plantation, but live next door. There's a parcel of land I own. I'll give it to you for pennies on the dollar. And J-Bo, if you just create a farm there where you can live there peacefully and everything is great. But I want to talk to you about something. How about on Saturday nights after you play your fiddle and, the Negroes dance and clap their hands? How about you come to my wife's quarters and, you see what I'm saying? Like this dude.
Okay, if you need proof, see, when people listen, we try to give examples of shit that you can look up on your own. There's a restaurant in New Orleans called the Two Sisters. It's been around for like 200 years.
Hmm.
The two sisters were two white women that used to buy slaves and was fucking the dudes. Like
What?
everybody, yeah, people when they tell the story, they laugh and chuckle. Well, the two sisters, well, they never married, but they used to buy male slaves, and they laugh about this. And it's called the restaurant's called the Two Sisters because the two sisters used to own this restaurant, this inn or whatever it was back 200 years ago. But they were, yes, everybody knows the story. So
I
when
bet
you
they were
look
into
at the
some
two
witchcraft.
sisters, hold it,
But
I
not,
ain't
but
got
not,
there
not the
yet.
good kind, the bad kind. Go ahead.
My point being is I don't want to add conjecture. I want you to look up for yourself. But everybody knows the story associated with this restaurant where these two sisters were slave owners, or they bought a bunch of male slaves and they were known for having sex with their male slaves. So here's the whole problem with the whole white supremacy and female supremacy that goes on is that it's hard to make people understand that sex is that big a thing where people manipulate and do fucked up shit for. They will set up whole societies just for one thing, to control their women or to control people for sexual purposes. Now, we all know about. I'm gonna give an example again. This is going back to fourth grade. We had a different teacher, but it drove me crazy when I was a kid, and they would tell us these stories about slavery and stuff like this. And they were like, "Well, they tried to use the Native Americans, but they died off, so that's why they brought the Africans over." This is what my fourth grade teacher told me. And looking, I'm like, "Damn, how do you know that? What book is that in?" But no, it was not. But if you pay attention, and now that I'm older, I understand because all this shit's intertwined. They were talking about the sugar cane, and they were talking about the Caribbean. That they used the Taino people first, and they didn't die off because the work was too hard. It was a brutal ass process, and so they said, okay, you got 30,000 people, we're losing 5,000 a month. We got to bring some people in. So that's what. So what I'm trying to get my people to understand, black folks were already here in the southeast. So a lot of y'all was already here, but that story of slavery covers up everything. So here's the point I'm trying to make: if you're doing some fucked up ritualistic shit, it's much easier to do it to a slave or do it to a
A voiceless
Mexican coming over
individual.
the border. Or yes, we're always hearing about. Okay, one of the deepest things. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now, but he thinks he's a shit. But one of the deepest things he said, like, how come I never noticed the number for missing children never changes? The numbers every year never you roughly 32,000 children go missing every year. Why is that number the same? And you're like, huh? And then you realize, you start doing research and you check out the FBI numbers. That shit barely ever changes. It's always around this. And then that rabbi from Jersey. Remember, we're listening to this old recording from the '70s. Might have been like '82, maybe '78, where this rabbi goes, "Don't you understand that we use some old Jews use a blood sacrifice?" Now, I'm not trying to put it out there on all Jews. That's not where we're going. But what I'm simply saying, the fact that you got some old motherfuckers that make cookies out of kids' blood, and they do that shit, and you can't figure out where these people go, and these numbers haven't changed since the '70s. And it's like, okay, with all the technology we got right now, shouldn't missing children go down? Shouldn't we be like, man, we lost 5,000 children last year, but back in '78 we lost 32,000? No, it's almost always the same number, and that's some crazy shit. Because so if you don't believe that this idolatry shit is out there, if you don't believe these people worship some crazy shit, if you don't believe it, here's a question that you got to ask yourself: is that the way you feel about your religion and the person that you look up to, or the idea that you look up to, they feel the same way about theirs, and they're willing to go a lot farther. And so that's the shit you do. Like I said, young men, we early on we're taught to like worship success, like, okay, conquest and things like that. That's just cool, but at some point it becomes bad when you start raping and killing and doing this other shit on behalf of some shit. So yeah, when we say
Wait. Hold
idolatry,
on, stop. I got to fact check something, man, because I looked up this thing that you're talking about. It's called the Court of Two Sisters. And these two women, one was born in 1858 and one was born in 1865. Slavery ended in 1865. Okay, even if the shit carried on in the South for another 10 years, that would only put them that would put them to 1870. So that they're still not old enough to own the shop. So that's a little fugazi right there. I'm thinking what was going on is that where the shop was located, it was the governor's row in the Marquise, which is the original building, and probably there was something See, it sounds like people took parts of history and put it together. And like
Put it
so
together.
and so what happened this is a situation of telephone. So probably in Governor's
Story got
Row
warped.
in the Marquise, that's where that was going on. The slave fucking was going on. But these two sisters were born in 1858 and 1860. So there's some Fugazi shit going on there. But go ahead. They might have been in the brothers though. I mean, no.
Look, they were lesbians also. They were lovers, but they would take, like I said, when you hear the story, people start telling you
They were sisters and they were fucking each other?
No, they were not biological sisters. It was called two sisters because they were lovers, and that was their whatever.
That was the cover story.
But they were but they were known to take other lovers and shit. Like I said, when people tell you the story, okay, here's the issue. When people tell you these stories, they laugh and chuckle and smile, and you're like, okay, cool. But I'm sitting there, again, like I said, my brother said, fact check and look it up. But when these people were telling this story, like you watch YouTube videos, it's one thing to watch a documentary on the History Channel. They tell you like, hey, they were two sisters. They weren't sisters. They were not biological sisters. They were supposed to be lovers.
Witches call each other sister. So
see,
and dude, that's New Orleans. So I mean, go figure.
But see, that's what makes it so deep. Like what you were saying earlier about about the symbolism. Just because you don't practice something or you don't subscribe to something doesn't mean the person that does subscribe to it, they see it, they recognize what it means. That's the whole thing with this country being found by Freemasons. There's a lot of symbolism in our money. There's a lot of symbolism in our building, in how our cities are set up, and these are directly related to some of that stuff. And to the layman, is a history class. Yes, in 1912, such and such did this, but to the initiated, it means something completely different. And that's the whole issue: is what does it really mean? What was it? What did the builder mean when they built this shit? Was it for the betterment of this country, or was it for, hey, so when my brothers come over, they know where to find shit? So, like I said, this is about fake gods. A lot of people don't understand that people worship sex. Whether it's called that, or
but see, here's the thing. Let me help you out with that. What they're actually worshiping is the power of sexual energy, and there's a lot of misguided notions behind that, and people who don't understand how to use sexual energy for spiritual growth. So what happens is that people get this surge of energy inside them, and they get all up in the fields, and they don't know how to control it. And so that's why you get people sometimes it goes to the mouth, and people just say nasty stuff, and they have diarrhea of the mouth because they can't control this sexual energy that's coming out of their mouth, and it overtakes their brain. They have sexual thoughts, and they can't control themselves. This takes discipline and practice to control this energy. But people live their lives willy-nilly, not knowing what's going on. They become addicted to porn, and starts off as regular porn, and then it starts becoming weird kinks, and you like all this weird stuff, and jack me off with your feet, and I'm gonna sit under this glass table and then shit on the table. What? This is all a distortion. These are all distortions of sexual energy.
But you know what? People sometimes attribute stuff to one thing, not realizing they're not related, or they're two separate things. And so that's one thing. Look, you're talking about a much deeper level. I'm just talking about, so say you're a 13, 14-year-old boy, all your homeboys do is talk about sex. Now, you ain't realize that only 3 of them out of the clique, maybe out of the 12, actually did anything. You know what I'm saying? And touched something. But the rest ain't. But they're still talking about it. So all of a sudden, it becomes a priority.
Hold on, stop. At that age, for a boy, vagina is the golden fleece. That is the thing that you're willing to go on a crusade, on a quest to get.
Smell my finger.
At whatever the cost.
But that's my point, is that early on, because of what these other people are saying and doing, it becomes a priority to you, which is cool. That's at a low level, it's healthy. But then there are some people who can't control those urges and have no self-control. Look, here's the point. This is, like I said, this is about fake gods. That pussy god becomes a god at that young age because of because people are talking about it and saying these different things, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and it becomes a big deal. And so, but that's just, again, that's at some stages that's healthy, but when it becomes unhealthy, that's when it becomes idolatry. When you love your fashion, fashion becomes a big deal. You turn 16, 17, you start buying your own clothes, and the thing back in our day was Jabot jeans, man. So it's one thing to like that and want to look good. It's another thing to get carried away and like, okay, I can't have nothing but Gucci, Gucci this, Gucci that. And again, what is that fashion designer worship? What is that fashion designer really putting out there? And what did that person mean when they made that article? Of clothing.
Dude,
So
there was some guy on social media that was making videos, and he would wear a Baphomet hoodie. Young black dude. This cat
mhm.
clearly had no idea what that was he was wearing on his chest. This image that he was putting on there that was connected to absolute darkness. And it's all cute and shit to put it out there and throw up the devil horns and throw and wear upside down pentagrams. It's real cute until you get pushed into that corner and you got nowhere else to go. And who you gonna call? Mm-hmm. You gonna look past all those other dark deities you've been praying to, and you gonna call out all. You gonna send that Hail Mary, pun intended, all the way up to the top. You can go all the way through the ranks of command. You can go all the way to the top and ask for help because those dark deities bow down to the one with the power, with the true power, the one that is the arm of God. All those little low elemental entities bow down when you call his name. But these kids, it's cute. It's cute and it's cool to worship this stuff because you're following the lead of dummies. Whether it's the wait. But no. But we know what worship is. But see, whether you know it or not, you're worshiping something. And so once shit gets tight, they call for help. But whether you're following the lead of your friends or these musicians or these actors and you think it's cool, you start wearing all black and you doing all this dumb shit and you drinking blood and I'm like, man, you have been led so far astray that you don't understand what's really going on. That you can catch diseases by doing some of this weird stuff that you're into. And then you suffer these dire consequences and then you ask for forgiveness because I can do all this stuff and then all I gotta do is ask for forgiveness and it's good. But let's steer it towards the media and let's steer it towards music. I remember some of the first concerts I went to when I was before, like a preteen. When I was a preteen, I was going to some of these concerts, or I would go, I would see some like these famous people in public, and I realized early the power of thought projection and how people project their hopes and dreams and their goals and aspiration onto other people. And for an archon, for the dark deities that are above these people, that control these celebrities that they pray to, this is fuel. This is the highest octane you can get at the gas station for your sports car. So you have all these people that will, create altars. I mean, you have super fans that are just super, super into, they will idolize these people. They got posters all over the wall. They got a little temple in the corner of their room with candles on there and sacred images of their idol. And, they write their names on their own body. All these strange things they do. Let me tell you that young girls that cut themselves, that comes from the land of Canaan. People would cut themselves for Baal worship. They would cut themselves as a means of extreme religious devotion. See, what that is that's the leftover antecedent of something really old. And people believe it to be just something that's just psychosomatic, that's just, a whim or humbug. No, that's an old practice.
Buried deep in your psyche, and it's been
In the
inherited.
DNA.
You don't realize.
Buried in your
Yes.
DNA. See, DNA is like computer code. It stores information. So most likely that girl that's cutting herself or that guy that's cut himself has an ancient ancestor that may have been into Baal worship.
Look, here's the deal: that one, we were hardwired for worship. That's why it's important for us to recognize what we're looking up to. But the point I was going to make is, when we were kids, you would see, like, you would buy the Word Up magazine, and you would have all these posters in there. And now it's Team Beat and Tiger Beat and all this others, and they come with posters, and you put the posters on your wall. They're preparing you for this worship. They're preparing you for this. You remember, like, during the 80s, you would see a TV show or commercial, and the guy or the movie, the girl would have all these posters on their wall of New Kids on the Block, or have all these posters on the wall of who was in style.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah. And so, but back in the day, you knew one or two people like that had a couple posters, maybe a football player. But now, no one just has one.
Let me say something. That's okay. That's normal. It's okay to have, one or two posters. But here's the thing. If that person had a poster of 4 different people on the wall, that's cool. But if it was just one person type of poster
over and over,
of the same person over and over and over, problem. That's obsession.
That's where it becomes obsession. That's when it becomes worship. That's when it becomes idolatry. When you're sitting here crushing it and you're going after somebody so hard. Like I said, having a crush on somebody, that's normal. Like, hey man, I like this person. Hey, when I was a kid, I liked Lisa. Apparently I was a titty man. But I'm not worshiping at the altar of titty. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't stop you from being healthy and having normal relationships and treating people the way it's supposed to. Some of this other stuff gets so dark and twisted where it sucks you in, and it makes you do things that you know is not right. But you justify it because your desire to appease or your desire to be closer to somebody that you can't. Look, how many of these going back in the day, stalking became illegal in the 90s, but there were stalkers before. The Beatle, who's the Beatle that got stabbed? That was a stalker. That was worship. They read Catcher in the Rye and they go stab somebody. That was that big thing back then. Not Yoko Ono. Who she married?
John Lennon got shot. He got shot. He didn't get stabbed.
Yeah, whatever. That's my point. But back in the day, it was always a thing. Like, okay, I want to be closer to the star, and so their whole thing is they want to get closer to the star, and then what? It's like you're not going to become their friend, so you want to kill so you want to kill somebody that you want to be close to.
But here's the thing, though. But let's make it personal. Let's make it personal. Hip hop in the black community, growing up post BC, before crack, but in the crack era, and you see hip hop artists blow up and make it out of the ghetto, and they're on BET and they're on MTV, and then you see some of them actually make it to the Grammys. When you see these things, you see somebody who has transcended poverty. And for black people, that's powerful. That's a huge thing to do. But you start to lump your hopes and dreams onto these people, and you don't realize that these people are starting to do these strange and weird things. And then it's like, well, some of them have got to be playing themselves. Will Smith did this movie called 6 Degrees of Separation, and he performs this lewd sexual act in a horse carriage in this movie. And I remember I watched that movie. I was like, The piccolo player is a motherfucker. And I knew that these people, I knew all along these people are just people. They're nobody special. All they did was started doing one thing as a young person and just kept doing it, and they got really good at it, and they got attention, and then they became successful at it. Great.
This is why good parents are so important. Remember your parent.
Duct tape. This goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show about why a child needs to have the correct type of nourishment from the very beginning, and to love that child for who it is and not what you want it to be.
Look, here's the issue. People are so desperate to fit in. They'll do anything. And what you don't understand, because you think because this person is successful, they got it all together. And the truth be told, they're searching and grasping for the same thing you want. That's why it's so easy for these people to get manipulated, whether it's emotionally, sexually, whatever. But the bottom line is that, he just wants to fit in. He just wants to be accepted. He wants to be liked by the people around him. He wants his handlers and his friends and coworkers and say he's doing a good job, and you don't realize that your parents warned you about that stuff. Like, hey, don't get sucked up in that. It's this. And when you're a kid, back in the day, being famous was how being famous. You knew that shit was phony. You knew Hollywood was phony, and real people lived in the Midwest, and crazy people live in Hollywood, and motherfuckers live in New York, snort cocaine. And these were generalizations that okay, that's not a good thing.
You knew like when somebody said somebody was Hollywood, you know they was on some bullshit.
Yeah,
because you knew it was fake. but hold up. You know what taught us about this early? Richard Pryor. The life of Richard Pryor. I watched this movie called JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling.
Dancer, Your Life is Calling.
And it was about Richard Pryor playing himself in the autobiography movie about himself, starting with his, child, all of him growing up in a whorehouse, all the way through his early years, as a comic, working for the mob, all the way into when he blew himself up from freebasing, the precursor of smoking crack. And you saw the transcendence. And he was very smart to show the fakeness of Hollywood. So I'm a small kid watching this movie.
Yes.
And I was soaking up all this. Was like, oh yeah, all those people out there are phony as fuck, and they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a damn about, the plight of black folks. They just want to make money off of you. So I learned that very, very early. But also at the same time, Duct Tape brought up a good point. When you have good parents, see, none of y'all know about his mom, but she was a very strong but wise, she's still alive, wise black woman. And she suffered no fools. So there was no chance, zero chance for him to come into their house with some bullshit, because it had a very short half-life of about maybe 10 seconds, and then that shit was done. But the same goes for my household, where I grew up in, because my parents weren't playing that shit either. And I'm speaking to this point of parenting. You gotta watch your kids. You gotta watch your kids and make sure they don't stray too far from your guidance. Their development of creating their personality is going to happen, and that's good because you want that to happen. But you cannot let them stray morally from who you are and what you've been taught, unless you've been taught bullshit. But the goal is to teach them to be good, decent people.
Hey, hold up. You had a real deep point. The reason my brother brought up JoJo Dancer, because this movie is all encompassing, is lightly based on Richard's life. But there's a scene, and there's a couple scenes in there that you got to pay attention to when you talk about the phoniness of Hollywood. And first things first, these motherfuckers wasn't getting paid a lot of money. So that's one thing that you got to understand. These celebrities don't make as much as you think. Now, nowadays, with these different deals and Viacom and blah, 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 they make a lot of money. But there's a scene in the movie where he falls in love with this white girl. Race don't matter, but he falls in love with
when
this
that
white
dude fucks his wife, his girlfriend? Yes.
See, hold it. This is so deep. So they're in love. He's broke. He takes like the little wrapper off a cigar and gives it to her as a promissory ring. Like, hey, when I get rich, I'm gonna buy you a real ring. So he's off he's doing a show, he's doing whatever. He comes back, he catches her fucking his producer or the homeboy, and they're laying in the bed naked, and the homeboy has the ring on, the little paper ring on. He's like, oh, hold on. Yeah, take your bitch back. But he hands her the ring back, and gets out the bed naked. And so why would he put that scene in a movie? Why would you do that that's pain. He's explaining to you that Hollywood is fake, that these people don't like you for who you are. They like you for what you can do for them. Watch that. See, fact check. When you watch that movie, there's a scene in there, and that shit just breaks your heart. But what it tells you is that
Hollywood will do the same thing. Hollywood will do the same thing.
It will hype you up, put you on a pedestal. But then you have to do something for that. That's idolatry. You have to do something for that fake ass God. You have to do something for that fake God. And you got to understand that back in the day, Hollywood was a thing that we didn't fuck with. It was a joke. You might get there. And look how many celebrities gave up their celebrity because they're like, hey man, I got this. Not what you think. Or the money ain't worth it. And you're like, what do you mean the money ain't worth it? That's millions of dollars.
But you hear this over and over and over. In the music industry, you would hear about all these hair metal bands that were
Yes, listen
on
to him.
cocaine and they were worshiping the devil. And you hear about the ones that want to get out. They don't want no part of it no more. And I'm like, oh, you got punked on some level. They got to you and you saw the true darkness and you fucking ran because you realized you fucked up, right? No, you fucked up.
Hey, another example. Let's talk about these college athletes, these high school kids going to visit the universities. Now you hear about all these coaches. Oh, I didn't know, I didn't know, I didn't know. But listen to these stories. So they get this young 17-year-old male athlete, 18, 17 to 18-year-old male athlete, and he's visiting different universities. So, you know, what's all you're doing is getting a scholarship. You remember you ain't getting no money. Now they're working on that right now, but you ain't getting no money. All you getting a scholarship. What do you think happens? Little cousin told me, he said, "Man, I want to go visit. I don't want to say Michigan because that's not the school, but he went to go visit uh, um, Big Ten school." He said, "Man, hey," he said, "Ren, you get to the car. It's like a limo. Ain't nothing but white girls in it. Like literally 6, 7 white girls. Now these white girls ain't tour guides, but they there to fuck you and suck your dick and do all this other shit. And the coach, like, oh, the coach don't know nothing about it, but the coach gives you a high five. It's good to meet you, son. The coach already came to talk to your parents, and so now you're visiting the school." And so you have to visit with your mom and dad where they show you academia, where they show you the big buildings. But then when you come back, like, hey, why don't you come back and meet some of the other players? So you get there and ain't no players in the car. It's nothing but for the fucking bitches. So right there, they're giving you pussy. If you think that you ain't supposed to fuck them, but this is
That's a car of persuasion. That's all
yes.
persuasion.
And so, again, you got these basketball coaches that got in trouble for that. When the shit finally got out, that okay, so you mean to tell me you didn't know that they were using local strippers to get these kids to come to your school? Oh, I didn't know nothing about that. I don't want to say Kentucky again. Look at it, but it came out that they were using local girls to get these guys to come to schools, or they would come visit and they would take them to these local clubs. I'm like, that's not even on campus. They're using this. This is idolatry. This is the fact that they're getting you to worship this thing. Like, look, we do everything for you. We handle your education, all your social needs, and we get your Jimmy sucked. And then all of a sudden, now you want to play football for me. Now you want to come play basketball for me. You want to come play in baseball. I guess the baseball thing ain't as big.
It's the same recruiting process that the CIA uses. It's called MICE: money, intellect, compromise, or ego. MICE.
Yeah. It's the four things that pretty much every man falls for. It might be a little bit different with women, but the bottom line is that this worshiping thing, this thing that you probably got hardwired into early on in life, they know how to tap into that, and that's what they're talking about. That's why idolatry is such a bad thing, because it's easily manipulated. It's easily a way to pull you away from your true values and your base intellect. Look, the point I was making earlier is that we all learned at an early age Hollywood was bullshit, and that it took a certain kind of person, and usually took a person that had a weak background to get sucked into that shit. It wasn't the people that had good families. In fact, we were taught that the person who went to work and had a normal job and normal life and raised their kids was the Hollywood motherfucker. He's going to be on drugs eventually. And so I think that's a big thing that people aren't recognizing, is that it went from drugs to sex, or it was drugs and sex in the beginning. Now it's something. Now it's just the fame itself is what Hollywood promises, because it ain't always promising money. It's the fame. It's the fact that everybody's going to know your name, that you'll go down in history, and you're like, well, shit, a small guy from Iowa.
Remember.
And they suck you in, and it's hard for people to understand that this is a whole indoctrinating process. America indoctrinates its people. You know, they start telling you at 5 that this happened, and you start believing that shit. Well, you know, that's why your parents used to warn you about certain people. Like, hey, don't hang around that motherfucker. Like, yeah, mom, you don't know. See, I looked up to my mom, so I was like, look, my mom must see some shit. How the hell could a motherfucker tell in 3rd grade this nigga wasn't going to be shit? But everybody she said wasn't going to be shit, they ain't shit. So,
okay. When I was a young teenager, I learned about Islam. I learned about the 5 percenters. For those that don't know, the 5 percenters are a small group within Islam in the United States of black men that practice a form of unwritten griot tradition, because most of it is not written down, but it was started by a Muslim brother named Clarence 13X. And when I began to learn about this, I would see Rakim on Yo MTV Raps and BET, and he would have this medallion, and this medallion was the sun, and it had a seven on it, and it had the half crescent. It had all these symbols. I started to study these symbols, and I started to learn about the 5% from some brothers that were in my local area who were practicing these beliefs. And I started to ask them, I was like, well, don't you have any documentation? Isn't there anything written down? No, everything is by word of mouth. I'm like, you don't have a scroll from some dude, some Yoda type dude from like 1,000 years? No, everything's written down. I'm like, So I started taking everything with a grain of salt. And the concept that, black man is God, which is dope. And Brand Nubian they were 5%ers. And Wu-Tang were 5%ers. And I started digging into this. And then, I started to hear about some of these dudes who are on coke, or they sold coke, or they sold crack. And I'm like, how are you going to be a god and you putting the devil's dandruff up your nostril? How are you going to be God and you selling death to our people? How are you going to call yourself a god and you doing this shit, man? So I was in this realm, this hip hop realm, because I was in a hip hop group. I was DJing also at that time. So I was around these people and I was around this life, and I started to see all this stuff. But the teachings of my youth, early youth, came back to me, and my spiritual discernment never left me. It just got stronger in these moments. And I started to see all these false gods, that these people who would call themselves God, but they can't act accordingly. They had no restraint. I'm like, you just like using that word. You ain't no fucking God. And you wearing these fucking gold chains and shit, that's idolatry. All this stuff about your Range Rover and all that, bruh, you ain't no God, bruh. Like, stop with the nonsense. And I started seeing all these hypocrites. I'm like, man, it's a lot of cats just using the name of God, but don't want to live up to it. A lot of false imagery. But yet at the same time, they were quick to point the finger at the white man and say this and that and that. And I'm like, man, listen, take ownership for your own actions.
It's scapegoating. Look, the white man has done a lot of wrong to us, yes. But they love to hit you with that scapegoating right in the middle of a conversation, right? Hey, man, how you going to do cocaine off the back of that white stripper? Well, the white man did it. Oh, okay. Cool.
Right. That explains everything hypocritical that you just did.
Well, what my brother's saying is that you run into this stuff early on, and you got to understand that this is okay to like something, but it's not okay to worship and put it on that level. It's also okay to have goals. Essentially what you learn at an early age is setting a goal for yourself, achieving a goal, and going to the next goal. But when you sit there and do it in a unclean way, in a way just to sit here and and
dude,
you just
when I found out some of the dopest MCs in the world were cokeheads, had smoked crack, or they put crack into their blunts, I was like, man, fuck this shit. Fuck all y'all. Like, y'all some clowns. When Wu-Tang says they smoke woolly blunts. A woolly blunt is when you put crack cocaine into a marijuana blunt. Okay?
It's called, down south they call it bone. We remember Trick Daddy. We smoke bone.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the thing is, that's a French word for good, so that's just Haitian. So anyway, I realized that I was putting too much respect into this imagery that had nothing in it, that really at the end of the day offered nothing to my people. And it was just entertainment, only entertainment. And that the real heroes didn't appear on a stamp. Like Chuck D said, my real heroes don't appear on a stamp. Those are the real heroes. The people who died in obscurity, fighting for what they believe in. Obscure because they didn't toe the party line. There was one musician I remember I heard about later. It was Bill Withers. Bill Withers was a
He,
talented musician. He has all these popular songs: "Lean on Me," "Grandma's Hands," "Use Me Up."
he did everything wrong.
He
Everything
well,
Anderson
see,
told me to do,
everything
he did the
wrong
opposite
according
of.
to Hollywood, but he did
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
right according to him. You need to watch this documentary about him. It's called "Still Bill." It's excellent, and it talks about how he blazed his own trail, and he did not toe the line. He said he would go to these Hollywood parties, and there was a bunch of phonies, and there was a bunch of fake ass people offering him drugs to just try and confuse him, and he didn't get involved in it. Until his dying breath, he was his own man. I respect him for that.
And one of the things they talk about with Bill, this sounds so simple. Why do you think songs have intros? So it gives a DJ a chance to talk. He doesn't do a lot of his songs. There ain't no intro. He just starts singing. He just do starts singing. They're like, hey, no, you got to do an intro. He's like, no, I don't. Like this is my song. This is my art. This is how the music moves me to write. This is and whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not doing the intro. Just that right there made people want to blackball him. He was blackballed by some different record companies, and people wouldn't play his stuff because the DJ didn't have a chance to talk. But when the song grew and got popular and people wanted to hear it, they had to play it. So he didn't put the cart before the horse. He wasn't making the song to be successful. He's making a song because this is what I feel. And hopefully, if I'm fortunate enough to make money and be able to support my family, cool. If I get anything else, that's just candy. But yeah, he's like, on some of his songs, they don't have intros. Like, just ain't no sunshine. We just go. Ain't no because of that shit right
They
there.
got to talk on the outro. They can't talk on his intro.
Yeah, no. But little stuff like that, it's crazy how that'll get you blackballed. Again, like the show, prime example, the show American Gods. Everybody likes Ananasi, but remember once Orlando Jones spoke out about something in real life, they cut him from the show.
But here's the thing, though. If anybody's going to watch any episode of that show, watch episode number 2 of season 1, or the Spider Nancy. He is giving this speech to these enslaved Africans that are halfway across the Atlantic, and he tells them to burn this damn thing down because you're fucked. You're fucked now. You're fucked for another 400 years.
In the afterlife.
Yeah. And 100 years after that, your people are fucked. So just burn this motherfucker down. That right there
Poignant.
had to be one of the deepest performances I've ever seen on television. Fuck all this shit about a person talking about, how I can cry on cue and I can talk about and I can feel the mind of a drug addict. Yeah, fuck all that. What he said right there summed up the plight of Africans in about 2 minutes. It was powerful. But that was the good use of media and entertainment and cinema and television. And it can be used in the most beautiful ways. But in the dark side of it, the thing that makes people worship people like Kanye and Kim Kardashian and Jay-Z and Beyonce, these people with these strange belief systems that are not in line with things that you believe. And you warp your morality system, the one that you're taught. You rebel against your parents, and then you start to practice mimicry. So there's ways that you can check yourself to see if you have fallen victim to idolatry. 1, are you seeking celebrity more than spirituality? 2, are you agreeing without question, with no critical thinking, to what celebrities are saying? 3, celebrity mimicry. Are you dressing like that person? Are you talking like that person? Are you trying to model your life after what this broken person is doing? And number 4, measuring celebrity accomplishments as a replacement for true spiritual growth. Right there. So, as you can see, people will mimic these people that they make idols. They will replace their moral system with the thinking and the actions of that celebrity. And then you hear about the celebrity doing all this sideways fugazi stuff, and you're at a crossroads because then you got to make a decision.
I think the only advice I got to people on this tip is when you got children, The whole thing they hit you with, that's not a big deal. Beware of the not a big deal. When somebody says something not a big deal, decide for yourself whether it's a big deal or not. You know, there's always this thing, and we talk about it, that people are more worried about how they feel than how they are. You should not worry about more about how you feel than your actual physical safety. And I've said this before, that you deal with this a lot. A lot of black women, a lot of black people suffer from the battered woman syndrome. And we have a whole show about it called Stockholm syndrome. And so what happens is you start worrying more about the well-being of the rich person than the poor person, or you start worrying about how your job sees you when they're the ones treating you like shit, or like somebody fucks you over, but then you try to blame yourself for being fucked over. That's it. So when somebody, so beware. What I'm saying is beware of that. It's not a big deal speech. Usually when a motherfucker hits you, that's not look, darling. It's not a big deal to sell yourself. Look. I'm broke. You need to go out and get money for us. That's not a big deal. The not a big deal is usually how they coat the penis with Vaseline before they fuck you. That's the not a big deal speech. That's what, like, hey, it's not a big deal that you're in Hollywood. It's not a look. Yes. Everybody does it.
That is what you call the just the tip approach.
Okay? Yeah, we all used it. We all used it.
That is when they're not gonna shove it in. They're just gonna put the Cyclops eye at the hole first.
Look.
No. They want to peek in the hole with the Cyclops eye. And then they're gonna push their head in just a little bit halfway.
Yeah, just a tip. I remember, like, your 16-year-old self. You're like, hey, you ain't got no condom. You know what I'm saying? You just want to be able to say you had. Hey, let me just put the tip in. Yeah, just a tip. Like,
but you know what they're doing now? You know what they do? Mormons out west, they call it soaking, where they just put it in, but they don't stroke.
Yeah. They just wait in the water. They call that waiting in the water. They just sit there and just marinate in the juice. That's all. Don't do shit. Just they talk normal when they do it.
But it's like, the same thing, and it's the same approach and idea that's applied to getting you into doing things that are against your belief system, that are against your
or
MO.
just straight up wrong. Things are just straight up wrong. They convince you that it's not wrong by using certain terminology, and that's what this is all about. This idolatry is that we're telling you worshiping false gods, worshiping false idols, worshiping things that can't ever make you better spiritually. And so, but that's how they do it. You hear about these celebrities, like, Dave Chappelle is a success story. He gave up a bunch of shit because he was getting fucked. And even now he speaks out. He doesn't even explain to it. He just tells you, don't watch my shit. I'm not being paid for it. If you love me at all, if you enjoy my craft, do not watch my old shit because they're not paying me for it. That sounds so minor, and that sounds so common sense, but that's the same thing. Don't sit here and let somebody convince you that being fucked over is okay. Don't let them put posters up. Don't let them do that shit to you. So I'm sorry, but that's it. Anything else, big bro?
I will close by saying that in the past, I think we've all done it. We have all looked to people that we believed had superhuman abilities, that were gorgeous, that had all these things maybe we didn't have, or they attained them before we had. And it's because we were still developing a true sense of self. And so later, as you grow and you mature, you start to realize, okay, well, I was just a young, naive person at that time, or naive to these truths, to these universal truths that will become apparent to you as you age, as you accomplish things and you start to see more of the darkness that's out there. And there are many times in your life where you will be given the opportunity to see it. And if you turn away and you keep wallowing in the blood, in the stool, in the semen, in the urine, and partying with these people and taking no accountability for your actions, then you are just as culpable as they are. So therefore, you have to be true to what it was that your parents originally taught you that was best for you. And you have to ask yourself, have I veered far from my truest self? Have I veered that far from my spirit man, from your spirit being? There are times when you sit there in silence, in solitude, and you have an awareness that grows about you. And you start to take account, or you start to take stock of all of your faculties. And you have to really realize that what is working for you and what is not working for you long term, in the long game. And so I really want to say that these people that you idolize, they're just humans. There's an old saying, never meet your heroes. And I began to see that as a kid, some of the people that I thought were really cool were really assholes. Michael Jordan was one of them. And I started to see that they're just flawed human beings. But I also learned that I can be entertained and appreciate the talents of these people and divorce it right there beyond that point. That I'm going to keep you in this spectrum, and I applaud what you do, but you're not raising my children. You're not going to influence the way I think, because you are a person that can be manipulated because you want to stay at that station and flourish from there. You want to stay in that limelight, and you want to do anything to stay in it. You will drink blood. You will sacrifice children. You will molest children. You will do the darkest things to keep that power, that control over masses of people. And you, while you're feeding off of it, dark entities, archons, are feeding on you. So therefore, I don't need no part of that. None of that is of any use to me as a spiritual man. And so I'm going to keep on doing what I do without worshiping anybody but my God. So with that, I say, peace. We out.